Okay folks, we need to talk about Whitney Cummings, because she's once again gone into hiding, and her media team is trying to make sure you don't notice by releasing pre-recorded content. Well, I might be the only one brave enough to do it, but I'm going to expose her. Now, as a child, Whitney was known for pulling cruel pranks, one time pouring scalding water onto a friend's hand, and another time pouring bleach into a cousin's shampoo bottle. And while these might have been naive childhood decisions, a pattern emerged that would keep people on their toes around Whitney for the rest of her life. Now, in 2001, a week after September 11th, Whitney abruptly packs up her bags and moves from Idaho to Los Angeles, claiming she was inspired to pursue her dreams. And looking back at it now, it's clear she was crediting the terrorists as her inspiration rather than the tragedy itself. So after a few temp jobs in Los Angeles, Whitney lands a stand-in role for a lead on a network television show called Scrubs. And if you don't know, a stand-in is someone who's used to literally stand in place of a lead actor for the crew to get correct lighting and camera angles. They can't just have George Clooney standing around while they get the white balance, so they have a stand-in actor. Now, Whitney was the stand-in for Sarah Chalke, and at the time they did resemble one another, and this is something that Whitney took full advantage of, and why she was eventually fired before the end of the first season. While at first Whitney was a charming presence on set, it didn't take long before the crew were making serious complaints to higher-ups about Whitney's so-called pranks. So some incident happened on set where a grip claimed that Whitney intentionally tripped him while he was carrying a heavy lighting rig, causing him to sustain minor injuries. And apparently Whitney told some people it was an accident while telling others that it was self-defense after the grip had tried to come onto her. Now offset, Whitney was parading around LA for all of 2001 pretending to be Sarah Chalke. It got her into clubs and parties and all the Hollywood hotspots. And you have to understand, it's 2001, you can't just look someone up to verify who they say they are. And Whitney did have a Scrubs lanyard that was clearly from the set, so she could prove that she was working on the show Scrubs, so people just believed that this was Sarah Chalke. Now the other reason Whitney got away with this is that she was known as a little bit of a shapeshifter. It didn't take more than a wig for you to believe you're talking to an entirely different person. And this was all working perfectly until one fateful night at an exclusive celebrity club, The Mint, where Whitney ran into a producer from Scrubs. Well, because Whitney had caused so much trouble on the set, the producer was well aware of her, and when he spotted her out at this club wearing a wig from the show, he knew exactly what she was up to. So Whitney gets fired from Scrubs, but she doesn't stop pretending to be Sarah Chalke. I guess now there was nothing holding her back. But over time, the word got out and Whitney was banned from most of the celebrity clubs. Once again, it was time to shapeshift. Now, one of the last places Whitney wasn't banned from was the Magic Castle, which is a famous Hollywood literal castle/venue for magic and some comedy. And one night while schmoozing, she spots an up-and-coming Criss Angel. Now, this is 4 years before his amazing television show Mind Freak, but Whitney hears this guy has just signed a big network deal. Now, you can guess what happens next. Within a week, Whitney and Criss are dating, and within a month, she's a part of his show. Now, those close to Whitney say this is actually when she thrived the most. You see, Whitney finally had a healthy outlet for her bizarre desires. She loved learning sleight of hand and being a part of a show that would seemingly stab a sword through someone's chest. So it seems she was actually in a good headspace for once. But before too long, Whitney did what she always does and pushed things a little too far. One night during a performance, she intentionally made the hook knot on Criss's wrists too tight and almost impossible to get out of. While Whitney thought this was funny, it actually broke one of Criss's fingers, which caused the next 2 weeks of shows to be canceled. Eventually, Criss became afraid to even sleep in the same apartment as Whitney, and so this is when he packs up and moves his show to Las Vegas. So Whitney is back at square one, looking for a mark to take advantage of. But now she has a powerful set of skills learned by the study of mentalism and sleight of hand. And with these new skills, she could have taken over Hollywood, but Whitney actually makes an unexpected turn. See, in her time at the Magic Castle, she witnessed all types of people: big rollers, business tycoons, celebrities, rock stars, and she realized she could either compete in a big race for these types of people, or she could completely dominate this other group of people known as comedians. And she was absolutely correct. So Whitney starts hanging out at the Comedy Store. She starts dating Ari Shaffir, and everyone knows the famous story about Ari beating up Bobby Lee, who at the time was going by Robert Rodriguez, because he had somehow helped another guy steal Whitney away from Ari. And this kind of stuff was happening all the time. Whitney would date someone at the Comedy Store and then cause some type of serious fight to happen, and it was all intentional. And so it wasn't long before Whitney herself was on stage spilling the beans about the comedians she had dated, which put her in an immediate power position. Everyone was terrified she would share their secrets. So over the next 7 years, Whitney basically ruled the Comedy Store. You have to understand, if a woman that attractive is at a comedy club, she is the boss. And on top of that, the tricks she had learned from Criss Angel kept the other comedians under her complete control. And anyone who wanted to perform would have to put up with her painful sense of humor. And there was even one night in 2010 where Whitney interrupted an open mic chanting "Fear Factor" over and over again and parading up onto the stage. The confused crowd must have thought it was a planned bit, but it wasn't. So Whitney pulls a reluctant Joe Rogan onto the stage and gets the crowd to chant "Fear Factor" and forces a blindfold on the stunned open micer who's still on stage. She then shoves something in his mouth that causes him to immediately gag and start throwing up. The disgusted crowd jumps out of their seats and starts leaving the venue. But members of the audience claim to have heard the open micers screaming, quote, "You made me eat shit." Now, it's unclear whether that meant eating human feces or just doing a bad set at an open mic, but years later, upon recalling the incident, even Joe Rogan claims it was human excrement that was fed to the poor young comedian. Now, every time Whitney gets called out by someone she can't trick with magic or sleight of hand, she will disappear for a few months. And if you look at the metadata for all of the last 3 months of podcasts and clip releases, you'll see they actually uploaded them 9 months ago. But in the episodes, they're acting as if it's been recorded that very week, being very careful to verbally specify the date. And in a strange recent episode that claims to have taken place this month, while having been uploaded 7 months ago, Sarah Chalke actually appears as the guest. And while you'd think they'd address having worked together 23 years ago and all of the drama, they never even come close. And some viewers have noted that many of Sarah Chalke's lines seem altered or manipulated in some way, leading fans to believe Whitney's team is using AI technology to make Sarah say whatever they want. And soon after, the episode was deleted entirely. Now, there's a lot more to talk about with Whitney. She famously dated Criss Angel's father, and they co-created the show Whitney, and she got back into Sarah Chalke's life once again via the show Roseanne. But we'll have to save that for another episode. But for now, Whitney Cummings, you're a total bitch. Okay guys, let me know who you want me to cover next. If you have any tips or information about any celebrity misactings, please leave them in the comments. I trust the TB community to only deliver rational, factual material as I have done. Remember, Big Hollywood does not want this to get out, so do your part and help spread the word before they spread my head.